Here we are, we're live. It's me, it's you, it's Phumi, it's Thursday. Yes, can only mean one thing. It can mean the burning platform at 7 o'clock this morning, where we'll no doubt have some interesting people. How's last week's character, huh?
I loved it.
He was great. There are some there's some very cool people in this country doing little things here and there that are either they're NGOs or they have a special interest or whatever. But thank God for people like that, because
listen, this is how
you wouldn't want to do it.
This is how you know our country has like Vumba in it, right? Is because we have a country that allows anyone and everyone to test the Constitution, to test the legalities of the world that we live in. I love it. Love it. And people who are questioning, I think people who are questioning are also, those are the people who move us forward, whether it's in science or art or, legal, but people who are questioning what is and what could be.
Absolutely.
Take us to the next level.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Some very exciting things that we've got on the agenda for this morning. We're going to talk about the thing no one wants to talk about, monkeypox. We'll get to that just now. Jesus, really.
Listen, before we talk about monkeypox, you know that Kendrick Lamar joint, that King Kunta?
Yes, I love that song.
In my voice, all of last night and this in my head, all of last night and this morning is, that he's mad.
Yes,
I am mad.
Yeah,
I'm mad at all of you guys. I'm mad at you. I'm mad at everybody that listens.
Why?
Because I share with you guys. I share what I watch, what I listen, what I read. I share all of that, and none of y'all thought to tell me about C.
What do you mean?
Have you this show with Jason Momoa on Apple TV?
Oh, I haven't seen that either.
With all the blind people.
I don't know about that. I
have not slept. I have not had a full night's sleep in 3 days.
What did you binge and binge and binge?
Yeah, because I have to work, but also it's so good.
Oh my God!
Just like, why is nobody talking about this thing?
All right, okay. Well, I didn't even know about it, so there's the news to me as well. So now I have some homework. My list of shows that I have to watch and listen to is getting longer and longer and longer every day. It's getting ridiculous.
I think the world needs to hurry up and like get the droids on stream, right? Get all the AI and all the droids on stream. I need more free time. I need more free time, so I need droids doing all of the work, like on Star Wars.
Totally. I am so on your page. You know what? Bring it on. I want all these droids building the things, making the things, doing the work, and we can just be sitting around consuming content and consuming food. I have no problem. Really.
I am so ready. That's why I'm mad at y'all. But anyway.
Pumlani says, well, Phumi, now you've told us about another new show. Like we needed that. And Congo Chris says, not all of us have time for TV, Phumi. Some of us actually work.
This is my point, Congo Chris. This is my point. This is why we need the droids to come on stream now. We're in 2022, for crying out loud.
Right. He does also say rise and grind, one day to payday. Yeah, it's tomorrow. Woohoo.
Oh,
although, I mean, technically...
Really? We don't have that life.
No, I mean, I usually get paid at the last day of the month, but...
I get paid on the 34th.
The 34th of August, only 1 month a year, Phumi, August-December. That's the month you get paid in, right? Yeah. Jesus. Shame, I got a message from a very good friend of mine. He said his wife and kids were held up at home on Monday while he was at work. And thankfully, no one was harmed, but they did tie the wife up and they stole a few things. And he said he's just, as a husband and as a father, he was at work and he just said he feels so powerless. He feels like he was in he was neglecting his duties as a man and as a father, and it's weighing on him very heavily. And he sent us all on our little friend group a message yesterday. I just thought, what a shit thing to happen to anyone, especially a family, and then they're young kids. I think they're all under the age of 10. It's just horrible.
Sure.
Yeah, this is the shit people are dealing with on a daily basis. So we can sit here and talk about like TV series and stuff, but this is really just such a horrible like wake up call. It's like, boom, sorry, that's what we're talking about. That's what's going on in the world. There's a sneeze for a Thursday, just for you. So, while we go from the sublime to the ridiculous, I mean, these stories, and it's just on my mind because he sent a picture. I mean, not a picture, a message to us last night. I was like, oh, what a shitty thing to have to deal with. And it kind of, when you read a message like that just before you go to sleep, it sticks in your head. That's what you think about. Like the Kendrick Lamar song was in your head all night. No, this is what happens to us. I had a really interesting business meeting yesterday, which also was stuck in my head. And then I've got a new addition to the family, who I'm not going to show you now, but Phumi met Alice, the little puppy, on Tuesday when I took her into the office. So I'll show you I'll show you a picture of her just now on the screen if you're listening to the show. But I decided the other day, it was enough of this living alone, and it was about a month, maybe just over a month, that I've been, since Carl died, and I thought this house is very quiet and it's very lonely and it's a bit boring. So I decided it's puppy time. So I went and got myself a little puppy, and that is what I've got. And that is my most exciting new development in the last couple of days. So I actually got her a week ago. Last Thursday was her first show, and Phumi was the only one who noticed that she was sitting on my lap for a part of the show last week. You were the only one who was sharp enough to see on the YouTube channel, out of all the people watching, Phumi was the only one who said, there's something going on there. So you really should be a private investigator, Phums.
Oh, but what I actually think I would love to be is a spy. Yeah, like James Bond type of spy, one that people watches, that follows people, follows people, because it's so amazing for me how there are some people in our society that are just unseen. You just don't see them. They and I think Black women are some of those people, can be unseen in places because we just kind of ignore them.
Because in the corporate workspace, Black women never used to have prominent roles, so people didn't take them as seriously. And in the household, they were like the domestic worker, and therefore people just kind of, they blend into the surroundings, and people do things and say things and
in front of you, everywhere. It's not just in the workplace, but it is everywhere, where you're just like, what? The things I hear people like talk about. Yeah. And it's not because you're eavesdropping, it's simply because they don't see you. They don't think that you're just blending into the background.
Well, it's a superpower, actually, where it's also, you could say it's a kind of dismissiveness, but you could also say, well, you know what? I'm going to use that to my advantage, which it sounds like you do. And you can be a fly on the wall, and you witness things, and people don't even realize that you're witnessing these things. That's an interesting point.
That would be, even when you travel, what I've noticed, just traveling internationally, you just blend into the background. People don't see you.
I've never really, certainly in South Africa, been able to blend into the background. I kind of walk into a room and people are like,
hazard.
Oh, it's that guy, So no, and I'm not feeling sorry for myself, because it can be tremendous, as we said now, for you, a disadvantage or an advantage, depending on what you choose to make of it. But I'm always, there's a part of me that wishes I could sometimes just be incognito, and And I know that sounds like, oh, there's someone moaning about their life when their life's quite good. Well, listen, I mean, it's nice to sometimes be just a part of the background, a nobody. It's nice to sometimes.
Marco
Well,
in the comments says same with people in wheelchairs, and I think I agree.
yeah.
Like people with disabilities.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, people kind of ignore them, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I took this little puppy in. I don't want to wake her up now because she's sleeping, but this is what she looks like. Phumi met her, as I said, on Tuesday, and she's the sweetest little thing. So she's 3 months old, and you know what? It's like a new member of the family. But I have to tell you, she's so good. She just wakes up and she wants to go and wee, and she goes outside. She's made no mess in the house. She's up and down the stairs, which I don't think she'd ever been up and down a staircase before. She eats properly. She doesn't bark. She doesn't whine. She doesn't do any of that stuff. She's the most divine little dog, and she's beautiful. I mean, I'm very, very happy to have her. And you have to have something, even if you're a cold, heartless bastard like me. You have to have something to love, Phumi.
Oh, it's so cute.
And to be loved,
she is
loved by, yeah, right?
She
something to love and something to be loved by.
Unbelievable. I'm a dog person myself. So, they're like cat people and they're dog people. I'm a dog person myself. We have a little pug. And,
Yes.
And dogs are just, it's wonderful to have something that finds you so joy-filling. When dogs see you, they're so filled with joy. They run to you, they love you, and you don't even have to be the person that feeds him.
No, but the fun thing here is that I live on my own, so this dog is completely, within a week, it's devoted to me. I mean, like she looks at me with these eyes like, okay, what are we going to do now? That kind of thing. And it is very, very sweet. You need to, I think what dogs tell you, especially a happy dog that's living with a person, a dog that is, it's like if someone has happy children, that they've got a happy house. They've got, if those kids are growing up with love and they're growing up with security and they're growing up with, the basics taken care of, then they're nice children and they have, good manners and they know how to behave themselves and they impress you. They're curious and they're interesting and they have little personalities. And if there are too many problems, you're like, oof, that house must be a bit difficult to live in for that kid. And the same goes for a dog. If a dog is happy and well adjusted and, not frightened and terrified of everything, or at the same time barking and behaving badly all the time, then you know that dog probably lives in a very nice, peaceful household. And it's a dead giveaway. Like if someone has well-behaved animals or well-behaved children, and I'm by no means saying that the two are the same, but then they usually are the kind of people that you can get along with. Certainly
there is a space though where the two are the same, the children and the animals, right? There's a small window of time where they really are. They depend on you, they love you all the time. The kids grow out of that, but the animals.
Well, Phumi showed me a picture of her son on Tuesday because we haven't actually seen a lot of each other during lockdown. We've done the show every week, but in person, we haven't seen each other for a while. She showed me a picture of her son who's now at boarding school. This guy is now your height.
Yep.
And man, is he growing up fast. I remember when he was just a little toddler. That was when I first met you.
With the mohawk.
Yep, that's right.
Look, and everybody, we had a whole thing about boarding school when Bulelo was here at the beginning of the year. What's also happened is he really has shot up because I don't see him every day. Right. When I see him, it's always a revelation. It's like, wow, this is a whole person now. This guy.
That must
high
be quite,
school is amazing.
Must be quite special and quite rewarding because since he's doing this weekly boarding, I mean, you don't see him for a few days. And then when you do, you appreciate that time together. I mean, I know that there's still lots to do. It's not as if he's, he's out of the country or out of the province. But at the same time, it's rewarding because you can actually see him with those gaps that allow you to appreciate the growth and the development that's happening there, the interests that he's picking up, and the good and bad influences and all of that stuff, right?
The distance is nice. The
Yeah.
distance is, it's really nice to have the distance and kind of the benefit of standing back. What's really awesome is, like I was saying, the kids and the dog and the pets, right? He's in that space where you're giving more autonomy to him, more and more. There's less of him for me to worry about. So nice. It's a little bit like a burden off your shoulders.
Don't worry. You don't have to feel bad about that, Phumi. A lot of people. Who did I see? I saw some friends of mine yesterday, and she and I kind of grew up together. And her husband said to me, I said, "Where's the little boy?" And they both went, "He's at school. Thank God." Like, and this kid is, I don't know, he's probably like 4 or something, 5. And they're like, "Oh, no. We need every moment we get away from him. We relish. We love our kid, but we relish it. So don't feel bad." Anyway, so all the people who want to meet Alice, I'll put a little. I'll pick her up just now when she wakes up and show you who she is and introduce you to her properly. But here she is. She was in the office on Tuesday, which she loved. She's tiny though. She looks big in that picture, but she's a little thing. I mean, Phumi, she was jumping all over you and saying hello when you came in.
Oh, she's awesome. She is very sweet.
So we will no doubt be seeing a lot of Instagram and so on with the little puppy involved from here on in, because people love, who doesn't love a puppy, right? Who doesn't love a cute little animal? Beats the hell out of seeing me. All right, so people want to know what her name is. It's Alice. Tatlejo says, "I am a dad, plants kind of person. I'm hardly at home. Not even fish can survive." You know what? Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. Some people are not keen on looking after things. They don't want to be watering plants or feeding dogs or taking them outside to pee or any of that stuff. Don't worry about it,
Taking them out to pee.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to take the plants out to pee, but even they deserve a little day in the sun. And you sometimes need to wash off the leaves and all of that stuff. So even that's work. I understand. We had a guy on Monday, Phumi, who does bonsai. And
I saw that.
Work. Did you see it?
I saw that. I love bonsai.
They look amazing, but they don't just get there on their own. You need to be looking after them the whole time. Anyway, here's Wendy. She says, "I rescued 4 bunnies, which were wild in the complex where we stay. There were 7. 3 were eaten by a massive ginger cat. I was so happy looking after the bunnies. My mom stays with them at night." Wow. And
how did you rescue the bunnies? I mean, bunnies are... Joburg has a lot of wild bunnies. You can't. They like run away. They're very jittery.
Yeah.
Fast. You have to be like a 3-year-old. I don't know how it is that 3-year-olds are able to just like jump in time at a bunny.
Right. Well, we have to address a problem, Phumi. Enough about puppies and bunnies, although that would be lovely if we could just talk about puppies and bunnies. So someone earlier said, "Are we ever going to talk about the Texas school shooting?" And I think we've got to just address that in a minute. But before we get to the serious things, here's an even more serious thing from Sanele. Sanele says, "Hi, my name is Sanele. For the second morning in a row, I'm adding vodka to my coffee. Yes, that's what the show has come to. I kid. It's just winter. Also, I was quite productive when I did it yesterday. Do not turn that into a habit. Sanele, please don't become an alcoholic.
Don't be that person."
Yo. By the way, I went and bought some liquor yesterday. I just went and stocked up. I like to stock up on everything. But it's expensive. I probably bought, I don't know, about 8 or 9 bottles of stuff that, I just, everything from whiskeys to kind of, just so that I can have a stock at home. Well,
that's quite did you win the lotto?
No, but I'll tell you what, I needed to. When the bill arrived, when the till had finished cashing up all the items, I realized I was in for some 3,200 Rand. And you know what, Phumi? I thought, it's not worth it. Like, if people are going to come to my house from now on, they must bring a fucking bottle of something, because I'm not going to be doing it anymore. No, really. It's getting too expensive. I used to be one of those people who would say, "You come to my house, drinks on me," Now I'm kind of like, actually, you should bring something because
No,
it's
but even if you're going to be serving drinks, surely when people come to your house, they bring you something. They bring you. I always bring a bottle of something when I go to people's houses, even if it's not what I'm going to drink on that day.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. I can name on two hands, which is quite a lot, the total number of people who've ever arrived. And I'm not talking about a fancy dinner party or anything else. I'm just talking about people who arrive for, whether it's cocktails or for a party or whatever. But people who arrive with a bottle of something. And really, they are some of my favorite people, not because they bring the bottle, just those kind of generous people. And my mom always taught me, if you go to someone's house for dinner, you take a bottle of wine with you. So
yes, you bring a bottle of wine for the guy and
flowers
for the lady.
Yeah, correct. See, look how old school we are.
Dude, I spoke at a youth summit on Monday, and at the beginning of my keynote, I did a little thing that says, so who in this room was born in, and I started 1997, not a soul. 1998, not a soul. 1999, there were like 3 people. And then like 2000.
Oh shit. Well, the 2000s would be 22 now, right? So that's like in the workplace, 22 is kind of where we start normally.
That's the work entrance.
Woo. Yeah, that means you've been through varsity and you now have like some kind of tertiary education. 22, you started work.
So yeah, baby.
Oh my God.
That's a reality check right there. But you say it's old school, but it's good manners. It's not old school.
No,
it is good manners.
I think that's a good idea.
It's like
Michael says on the issue of bringing wine and flowers, fuck Gareth. Well, look, I mean, up to now, I have always said if people come to my house, don't worry to bring anything. Maybe bring some ice or some mixes or whatever else, because I'll handle the booze. But I'll tell you what, that's going to change as from this week, and no more shall that be the case. I think also alcohol, with all of those government sin taxes on it, with the cost of import for certain alcohol, and I'm not buying fancy stuff, by the way. I'm not buying like bottles of Hennessy or Remy Martin XO or imported gins and vodkas or any of that stuff. I'm buying the stuff that's ordinary. I'm not
stock standard.
Correct.
Gordon's dry gin.
Right. Yeah. So you want gin, that's what you're going to get at my house. You want something fancy? You brought a beautiful bottle of gin for Rena on Tuesday. The most gorgeous bottle, and it's Phumi. Phumi finds all these things that are, you can't just buy them. You can't just go online and order them. You can't just get them at the liquor store. This was a beautiful bottle of like Fynbos or Rooibos or floral or
Rooibos. It's Rooibos. It's a Rooibos gin.
Which, I mean, the most beautiful packaging. This gorgeous little bottle, and then Rena and I are like, well, we'd like to buy a few of these and give them as gifts, and you're like, well, you can't, because that's you can only get them from this shop
from the farmhouse.
From the farm.
I absolutely love that gin. But I think buying gifts is one of the absolute joys of life. Buying gifts or getting a gift for somebody is one of life's untold joys. Love it. That's why Christmas is so wonderful.
Yeah, well, it is. But you see, you actually live this, Pums, because you do arrive with a bottle. You did it on Tuesday, so I can vouch for that, and I can testify to the fact that that's what you do.
It's one of my like markers if I'm raising a good child, when Gareth done, like when he's done being raised and is on his own. I hope he continues to do that. So when we go to people's places, he must always, he knows, he must hold the flowers to give to give over. So I hope he learns and he doesn't forget it. Well, and he was born in like 2007. I mean, his ID looks like a phone number.
Let's hope he does. I mean, the chances are very good he will, because he's got you for a mom. So again, that's when people say privilege, whether it's white privilege or this privilege or that privilege. I always say the biggest privilege you can have, and it's one that you can't even measure the value of, but it gives you the biggest advantage, is to have a mom and a dad who love you. And even if it's one parent who really loves you and puts in the effort, and also
or granny,
yeah, of course, but
a
someone
granny that loves you.
I'll tell you what, that's privilege, because there are so many kids who grow up without any of those things we've just mentioned, and it's impossible. It's damn near impossible to even compete against people if you don't have that. It's really, really hard. So that's the real privilege. Anyway, let's look at some stories that are in the news this morning. IOL reporting about this story in Texas at Robb Elementary School. What a story. So a total of 19 students and 2 adults were killed on Tuesday when a teenage gunman opened fire at an elementary school in Texas before the shooter was shot dead. That's a spokesman for the Texas Department of Public Safety confirmed on Tuesday. According to CNN, it happened at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. It was on Tuesday. The 18-year-old who was the suspect has been killed. Now, I'd just like to look at something quickly. There's a table that someone sent me of school shootings in the world, all right? So school shootings. So the country with the most school shootings is the United States. 288. Okay, that's way, 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 way higher than number 2. Number 2, so 288 is the United States school shootings. Guess what number 2 is? Country and number. Any
number
guess?
2. Ireland.
Mexico.
Wow.
Right across the border from Texas.
No guesses who they are in close proximity to.
Correct. And guess how many Mexico had? Remember, America, 288.
10.
8. So the second place goes to 8 school shootings. The first place goes to 288. America.
What's the period that they're measuring it at?
This is over the course of. Hang on a second. I've got to just check this because I didn't supply the table. So let me just see what it is. I'll give you the exact details, but it looks like it was pulled. Here we go. World Population Review says school shootings by country 2022. Okay.
Sure.
So that's the number we're looking at now. This is just for 2022. So this year, it's not even, we're halfway through this year. And America's had 288 school shootings. South Africa is third, which I didn't know. And that was the
shootings. Wow.
For me, South Africa has 6 school shootings. We come up third in the world.
Shootings, not stabbings.
School shootings, Pums. This is what we've got. So it's unbelievable to me that we should even be on this list. I wouldn't have thought we would be there.
Sure.
A school shooting is an attack that involves the use of firearms, takes place at an educational institution such as a primary school, secondary school, or university. Many school shootings are categorized as mass shootings because of the number of people injured or killed by the attack. Individuals who commit school shootings are often influenced by debilitating factors that may include various forms of abuse, family dysfunction, mental illness, or other psychological problems. Common sources for the motivation of shooters can include depression, suicidal thoughts, a feeling of persecution, retaliation against bullying, or a desire for attention and recognition. While sources of entertainment such as films, video games, and comic books are occasionally accused of being influences as well, these accusations are rarely, if ever, backed by credible science. So the article goes on to talk about America and how it's a uniquely American crisis, but it's difficult to dispute given the alarming frequency of the US compared to the rest of the industrialized world. That said, school shootings have also occurred in other countries. They're sometimes the work of 1 or 2 troubled individuals. Some shootings have been coordinated terror attacks. So
sure.
It's scary to think about the fact that we, here in South Africa, are third on this list. South Africa experienced 5 school shootings in the year 1994 alone, resulting in 8 deaths in total. So that was back in 94, but we're talking now about 2022. So I mean, I'm not surprised that we would be on the list, but I didn't think we'd be that high up. Number 3. But it does show you the huge leap from number 1 to number 2 is just, it's crazy, right? So in South Africa, says Michael, it's almost always gang related. That is true. The Western Cape is where most of it happens. And it has a lot to do with drugs, as Sanele points out too. That's also a big thing in South Africa. But in America, you know, they're still trying to figure out what this is and why it is such an American thing. Anyway, we have to get some other headlines in here. We can't just look at this horrible and very depressing story, because really, what do you do about it? Like, you can't prevent this. You can do mental health assessments for everybody in the whole world, and some of these people will still slip through. It's like that Buffalo shooter in New York who went into that supermarket and killed all those people. I mean, it's just outrageous that we live in a world where someone can pick up a gun and go and do all that. And you can argue, say the availability of guns is a big problem, and it's a good argument. I'm not going to dispute that. But I think disturbed people will find a weapon. If it's not a gun, they may use a knife. I mean, the guy who attacked Dave Chappelle on stage the other night had a knife in his backpack. Now, how that got through the scanner, I don't know. And you know what? There are even, despite all of the attempts by airline security and you know, the departments in government that are meant to look after this stuff, there's still people who manage to smuggle dangerous things onto planes. So we're never going to get zero.
People, a person with the will to do a particular thing will find a way to make it happen. Yes. But what I'm always intrigued by, especially in America, I mean, America and mass shootings, it's when that Buffalo shooter incident happened, I saw a thing about the average, on average, there are 2 mass shootings in America a week.
Jesus. That is way too many.
A week.
A week.
We're not even halfway through the year, and they've already had something like 300. And I was just so astounded at how strong the gun lobby then is in America, where getting a gun, getting your hands on a gun is so easily accessible to so many different people. And it's also not just, what fascinates me also about America is it's not just handguns, right? People have rifles, semi-automatic, and I'm just like, the gun culture of the US is really something that fascinates me tremendously. You know, there was a documentary about gun ownership in America, and how many people have more than 3 weapons.
But you mentioned the words in succession there. You said gun culture, and that's the real thing. I mean, like, America has a gun culture. You know, in South Africa, we have certain things that make it cultural to be South African. We've got all these languages. We've got people who have, you know, various kind of cultural practices, which are frowned upon by the rest of the world in some ways. You know, whether it's, you know, the circumcision rituals, or whether it's the reed dances. They all look at us and go, "Ooh!" And I mean, those don't hurt anybody in a physical sense. So I think they're far more acceptable. But America comes from this history, and I know people think, "Oh, well, that's old, ancient history." Remember, the American Civil War was only 170 years ago. Now, I know that doesn't sound like, you know, yesterday, because it's beyond living memory, but the American Civil War was fought by ordinary people who picked up their guns. It wasn't organized armies in every respect. And about 100 years before that, the Americans raised their arms against the British. They are a nation of fighters. And part of that is what has contributed to them becoming such a powerful country in the world, because they've got this fighting spirit, and they won't be told what to do, and they believe in their freedom and all of that stuff. And it can be taken to extremes. But America is a country where there is a civilian army, an armed populace, and it's part of being American. And you know what? It goes across the race divide. I mean, we had old Maj Toure on my TV show a couple of times, and he's the founder of black guns for America. And, he, for example, says that the reason that black women are predated upon so much in America is because they don't have guns. So there's that argument. The guy who eventually killed this 18-year-old at the school in Texas this week was a border patrol guy who had a gun. Otherwise, who knows? He might have killed even more people. So there are all kinds of ugly arguments. I don't want to be on one side or the other of this because it's too binary. It's too simplistic to look at it that way. America has a big problem. And if you think this is okay, you have a big problem. They've got to figure a way out. And I don't know how to help them figure this way out. I just know that the answer is not to blame just mental health. And the answer is not to just blame guns. Because a gun in the hands of a good person who's there to protect other people can be a tremendous advantage. And a gun in the hands of a madman can do irreparable harm and can bring huge, huge pain. So I don't know. Speaking of a bit of a pain, I mean, by no means comparable to the pain in Texas, but our mayor of Johannesburg seems to be doing some pretty painful and ridiculous things at the moment. And we may discuss this in the Burning Platform a little bit later on. But she has said this, which I can't argue with. I like this. She says, give me 18 to 36 months and she will end endless blackouts. She says in just 2 days, she's shifted the city's energy policy from state-led to independent power producer-led, tossing out the practice of using Eskom's energy to build revenues. Now, I'm all for that. And who wouldn't be? This is a story by Ferial Haffajee in the Daily Maverick. Successive ANC governments in Joburg grew fat by adding levies to Eskom's bulk price for electricity. The city's budget is 30% funded by the additional taxes it puts on Eskom's already expensive product. Now Joburg's DA mayor, Monkeypox, plans to bring independent power producers onto the city grid as quickly as possible. So that's great. And I think we should applaud her, and I hope that this works. And Ferial goes into quite a lot of detail around her MMC for infrastructure, Michael's son, who's trying to learn about how to get from load shedding to independent power producers. And obviously, Pums, if that'll work, I mean, how many times have you had to rush to the office in the morning to do this show because there was no power at home? So we want this solved. But
we all want this solved.
Sure, but Monkeypox is also done, and she's been a guest on this show twice. So I don't want to be mean-spirited or a bad host when she comes on next time and sound like we're talking behind her back. She did a very weird thing at the funeral of the former mayor, which happened on Sunday. She tweeted out something about, I'm not going to die on the job, which I thought was...
She said it on the podium.
Which I thought was very weird. I mean, obviously tasteless, ill-timed. And I'm saying that as someone who's not the most sensitive, creature in the room. What do you think of that? It's a bit odd, right?
She said it on the podium.
Yeah.
It was part of her, I don't know, I suppose her as a colleague. I don't know. I don't know how she got to get the platform. And there was a lady behind her. If anybody's seen the video, so there was a lady behind her who maybe is a family member or whatever, who was so visibly shocked by that statement. She just like went and ran off camera. It's just like, it was very weird. It was very odd. Talk about centering yourself in the midst of other people's pain. It was wow. It really was wow.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see what she does with this electricity. I applaud anyone who's going to tackle the monster of electricity provision in this country. It's a difficult thing to do. I don't know whether Andre de Ruyter is making any progress or not. We hear about huge amounts of sabotage that are going on at Eskom, but I don't know. I mean, if someone's trying to solve the problem, you have my support, but solve the problem. Don't just tell us you're going to solve the problem. And then, we can all get behind you. Because I actually read this out, I think last week when we were talking about raising rising prices everywhere and how we're trying to save
everything.
Money. And Eskom have just pushed up the price of electricity in Joburg by 15%. So you're going to be paying an extra 15% on power, which is already hugely expensive. So If she can help solve this, good. We're with her. All right. Quick look at some other headlines. First of all, do you care about Ryan Seacrest, and when last did you see him on TV? You used to be a massive American Idol fan, right?
Hell's bells. I was right
Yeah,
up until they unfairly didn't let Adam Lambert win. Very unfair.
Right. You're a big Adam
Then
Lambert.
I had to stop. I actually had to stop in protest.
Well, I haven't watched American Idol since probably 2009 or something. So I really don't know what's been going on there. But apparently Ryan Seacrest is still the host.
Still the host.
He had a wardrobe malfunction during Sunday's
dear.
live broadcast of the finale.
So did people see his face?
Well, he wound up swapping underwear with a stylist called Miles during the commercial break, which was a quick fix to the problem of Seacrest's anatomy, referring to his genitals, which was showing through his pants. So apparently he told the story on Kelly Ripa's show on Monday morning. Miles is in charge of the suits that I put on. He makes sure everything's lined up and buttoned. You know, when you go to a commercial and they go, "Can I tell you something? You need to change your underwear." So apparently this is what was happening. The host was confused at first and then went on to notice that viewers had been talking about the anatomy in the shot when he was on stage in his suit pants, but he didn't have any extra underwear with him. So the host told him, "Don't worry, I got mine." And they quickly undressed and exchanged boxes. Very important.
For a dick print. Okay, there we go.
So if anyone wants to see Ryan Seacrest's details, you can find, I'm sure, a still shot on the internet, which will give you all the information that you require this Thursday morning, if that's what you're after. But I mean, that passes for news in Hollywood these days. Talk about ostriches with their head in the sand. Also, while we're talking about power provision, this is quite a good story. Ekurhuleni has got a head start in the race to buy its own power. Ekurhuleni, of course, being the industrial hub, more than 3 million people in the east of Johannesburg, they may have a head start because a program to procure as much as 700 megawatts of electricity that began in 2016 is coming to fruition. One of the funders say the project to build a 41 megawatt solar plant at the cost of R1 billion will begin by the end of this year. We've secured the equity, and once that closes, we can finalize debt and basically start overnight, said Justin Naidu, who is the chief executive of African Growth Partners, which is working with 5 independent power producers. We will start building the project before the end of the year. So that would be good news for the people of Ekurhuleni, don't you think? We'll take it.
Listen, I think more than just good news for the people of Ekurhuleni, I think it'll be great news for everyone else, because it'll show how everyone can diminish the power of Eskom, which is actually what we need. We need to stop throwing good money after bad with Eskom. We just need to accept that it's going to be one of in a mix of power suppliers, and let it become smaller and smaller.
Absolutely. Spot on, Pums. That's the way we really win. You don't win by railing against this monster over and over again. And then it has to. We couldn't have a morning, in the month of May without talking about Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. So Kate Moss was on the stand yesterday.
But how long is this trial going on for?
Your guess is as good as mine. But Kate Moss was on the stand, and she said, it has been insane to hear Amber Heard's claims. Over the course of the 6-week trial, the court has heard vastly different versions of what transpired between the two during their volatile 2-year marriage. Ms. Heard and witnesses for her side painted a picture of Mr. Depp as an abuser, plagued by drug use, jealousy and self-harm, and Mr. Depp's side putting forward a story of the actor as a good guy and the actress, that's being Amber Heard, as an aggressor, and her claims as being untrue. So Kate Moss arrived and said he never pushed her. He once came to her aid when she fell down the stairs. As I left the room,
they were married for 2 weeks. For 2 years. They were married for 2 years.
Yeah, okay. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp were. Yeah, correct. But Kate Moss said, which is direct contradiction of what Amber Heard has been trying to put forward. Kate Moss said, he never pushed me down the stairs. He never physically abused me. There was never anything but love. In fact, he came to my aid during that one occasion where I slipped down the stairs. So this is not good for old Amber and her team. She's going to have to come up with some very, very good stories very, very quickly because it's starting to look like she is making shit up. And I wouldn't be surprised. Just saying. Any further comment on that, Pums?
No, thank you. Move right along.
All right, we will move.
I'm looking
right
for.
along.
I'm trying to find the calculator in my iPad because I want to calculate 6 weeks is a percentage of the 2 years. They have been married for 2 years and are spending 6 weeks talking about this 2 years. And
I agree with you. Yeah,
I am devastated at the waste of time and energy and good brains.
Total waste of time. And you think about how embarrassing and humiliating this is. A lot of people saying, "Oh, this is good. Johnny Depp's going to bounce back after this," but Amber Heard can't, right? She's always going to be the woman who shat in the bed, always, forevermore.
Bon, guys, in 2022, this is what we are reduced to. We don't have droids. We don't have droids to clean up after us, and people are talking about shitting in the bed.
Hey, it is the trial of the year.
That's why we don't have droids. That's why we don't have droids. We're concentrating on the wrong things.
But that you get what you deserve. What you pay attention to becomes your reality. And people are paying huge attention to Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. This is all they care about at the moment. I mean, it's hilarious. Someone was saying the other day, we've got these serious stories like school shootings. I think it was Bill Maher. You're saying school shootings and a war in the Ukraine and all this. People's attention is just like a goldfish. You can distract them with anything. Now it's like an actress shitting in the bed. That's still number one to some people. They're paying more attention to that than they are to aliens. I mean, so I don't know if you saw, but in Congress last week,
yes,
we were told that there have been over 800 unidentified flying objects, which may or may not be alien spacecraft, that they're admitting from sources like the Air Force that they've witnessed. Now, there used to be a time where an alien story would have everybody going, "Oh, what?" Now, we can't even get people to pay attention to actual alien unidentified flying objects because they're watching Amber Heard.
Listen, now y'all wish that storming of Area 51 had really taken off, don't you?
There's stuff there, I'm telling you. People don't know. It's great. All right. We got lots of people here talking about all kinds of other things. Let's just have a look. Amber Turd, as G-Star calls him, looked so crazy. I hope Heard sees the inside of a cell. Purgatory is a crime. I think you mean perjury.
Purgatory.
And I think you just spelt it wrong. It's Pergury, but I get you, Congo Chris. I see what you mean. Perjury. Lindy Ntuli, the only time you'll hear us say where we live, I think that's in response to a question. Lindy says, the one time I can be proud of living in Boksburg. And that's because you mentioned Ekurhuleni in that story about power. So, Pums, you did. I brought this up right at the start of the show, and we've only got a couple of minutes before we go to the burning platform because this hour is it's just rushed by. But you wanted to talk about the monkeypox. So let's look at this because this is now the thing which the World Health Organization is saying we must all be careful of, and it's really, really dangerous. I mean, the monkeypox apparently has been around since the 70s.
Yeah, monkeypox is not new. It's just has been confined to East Africa primarily.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And in the past 2 weeks, there have been cases in Europe, in Australia. So in a couple of countries in Europe and in Australia. Yeah. So now, of course, we must all worry about it. Yeah. Now we must all worry about it. But what I was particularly interested in is watching the way in which they are speaking about the monkeypox. So it started a little bit with when COVID came, and we saw how people kind of lost their minds about mask mandates and where and what. And the shaming of people who weren't doing or complying, right? And now this monkeypox has the same language creeping back. You remember how when HIV and AIDS in the 80s and the early 90s, how there was so much shame linked to getting the disease and having the disease and eventually dying. I mean, watching the documentary about the artist the other day, and he talks about, in his diary, he has a whole lot of things about the gay cancer, is what they used to call it. AIDS.
That's right.
And so it was linked with so much shame. And again, they're starting to do that again. And I was just like, we're moving backwards. Another thing where we're moving backwards, where illness is being linked to shame, because and the way that it's primarily at the moment, it seems to be spreading through homosexual behavior. And I'm just like,
all right, but let me ask you this. I mean,
surely we have learned.
Well, what we have learned from last year and the year before with COVID is that mostly the people who were adversely affected to the point where they had to worry about their life, not just their general health for a couple of days, it was old people who had respiratory conditions, and people who were vulnerable because they were obese or had diabetes or any of that stuff. Those are the people who were most adversely affected. We know, for example, that at the beginning of COVID, it was fairly clear that kids were safe, that kids were not going to be major victims. I mean, the number of children worldwide that died from COVID was immeasurably small, right? Or rather measurably small, but very, very small. So it would have been helpful at that point for us to not have treated children like the rest of the population. And this is where I hear what you're saying about we don't want to turn this into another reason to discriminate. But I'm afraid when it comes to diseases, if we've discovered that something is sexually transmitted, which it appears that this is, that we should then make that clear to people so they know how to not get it. Apparently, all these cases of monkeypox in Europe, and you point out quite rightly that nobody cared when it was in East Africa, but now that it's in Europe, it's a big thing. All of these cases in Europe seem to have come from two events. They're calling them either a gay rave or a gay bathhouse or a whatever. It helps for people to know so that they know whether they're in danger of contracting this thing by breathing the air or if they have to actually have sex with someone to get it.
Monkeypox is viral, right? So monkeypox is viral.
Yeah.
Similar to chickenpox.
Right.
And it does spread through contact and touch and particularly broken skin. So it's not necessarily through sexual contact.
Okay.
It's just that these cases, this is the link. So probably somebody who had it, and because the homosexual community hangs out with each other, that's where the close contact has been. It's not necessarily that it is sexually transmitted.
I don't think anyone's jumping on this to say, it's a gay disease, it's a punishment from God, like those old preachers used to say.
No, so they're not saying it's a gay disease, but the way in which the kind of the press conferences that we've seen are press conferences that are saying people who should be vigilant are homosexuals and men who have sex with men. And if you've been to any of these, and I'm just like.
But Phumi, just let's be honest too, that is 100% of the cases reporting in Europe at the moment. So it's useful information. People want to know that
information.
Stuff. It's not discrimination. It doesn't come from a place where someone is actively trying to discriminate against gay men. It comes from a place where people want to know how this thing spread and whether or not they're at risk. That's all. COVID taught us that we're not all equally.
That's my point. Is if you then confine it to the fact that these cases have been in this space and not open it up to say, actually, you don't have to have sex with somebody to get it. If you are in close contact with the person who has it, whether you are a man having sex with men or not, you're likely to get this thing. And that's where the framing is, where the framing is problematic. And it creates.
I don't think that's the biggest problem here.
No,
I think I really don't. And I mean,
Watch.
I understand what you're saying about like discrimination in the 80s and 90s because of AIDS being a gay disease. And, there were all kinds of other horrible things that people did and said about these diseases. But I don't believe you could put discrimination first and foremost. In fact, I think what that ends up doing is almost doing a disservice to the community who, in this case especially, we can observably by the figures see is more at risk because that's where it started spreading. And I don't know, I've never been to a gay bathhouse, but I assume there's certain things that happen in a gay bathhouse that don't happen anywhere else. And if that's where it started, let's just be honest about it. Gay men are adult and they're sensible and they're just as clever and they're just as capable of figuring out bullshit from truth as anybody else. We don't have to create a special category where they are protected from discrimination against someone who's not discriminating against them. They're just talking about a disease.
Dude,
Really?
And all I'm saying is you can say it's emanated from this community. It has started here, but everyone is at risk if you come into contact with the person, an animal, or a surface infected with this thing.
But
that's
if it came from a gay rave, as some sources say, or a gay bathhouse or whatever, I don't think they're just having cocktails with each other there. Although one part of that word cocktail is maybe right. All I'm thinking is
stop it.
No, but let's just call it what it is. In fact, if you care about that community, don't worry about them being in some indirect way being discriminated against. Let's help fight this by telling the truth about it and not
tell the truth.
And it's not saying something everybody, now kids are at risk or monkeypox is going to have us all walking around in masks, or let's not bullshit ourselves. And also, it would behoove organizations like the World Health Organization, which did itself no favors over the last 2.5 years, to start telling the truth to people. And I think gay men in the world are just as capable of hearing and internalizing and using useful information to their advantage, not being treated like children, where we immediately go, ooh, the last thing we want is discrimination, and putting that cart ahead of the horse, which is the disease.
The last thing we want is people not being vigilant because they think they don't fall into the category of people that could get the disease.
Agreed. But it seems to be 100% of the cases that we're seeing in Europe at the moment are in this community. So let's help them. Let's not treat them like kids. They're adults. They want to know this stuff. Anyway, let's get on to the burning platform, which is coming up next. Don't go anywhere. We're joined this morning by a returning contender and someone who we love to hear from. Mighti Jamie joins us again, an award-winning international debating and public speaking champion and coach. It's always good to have Jamie on, and we got a lot to talk about this morning, including some of the issues that we spoke about this morning, the gun control, the monkeypox. We've got so much to get into. Plus, it was Africa Day yesterday. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on the rest of the continent and how that affects us, how it plays into our reality. All of that and more on the way. It is Thursday on cliffcentral.com. Good morning.
This week on the Auto Trader podcast.
Do you think in South Africa that's the same top four?
That's an interesting question because I think in South Africa we are more price sensitive.
For sure.
I think our currency and our currency and what it can buy is not as strong as European currencies or the pound or the dollar. Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
Some people want to forget all about the 80s. Some people would prefer not to remember the hairstyles, the movies, the fashion, those pants we used to wear. God, those pants we used to wear. Some people would prefer to never hear an 80s song ever again. We are not those people. That 80s show. Music, movies, obscure references, and so many unchecked factoids. Fridays, 9 a.m. on Cliff Central. People say we're stuck in the 80s. Like it's a bad thing.
All right, it is time for the Burning Platform, which is brought to you every single Thursday. We got lots of things to get into, plenty to talk about this morning, and loads of issues that may or may not affect you. A lot of people are thinking about their pocketbooks at the moment, their wallets. A lot of people thinking about their bank balance because everything is getting more expensive. And we're expecting a massive petrol price hike in the next couple of weeks.
Next week? Is next week the first Wednesday?
It could even be up to, 3-4 rand a litre extra, which is going to hit every one of us hard. Because if you think it doesn't, you just have to watch the food prices and everything else go up in a commensurate fashion.
The notice I saw actually said something like 1 rand 97 for unleaded, and just over 2 rand for diesel. And paraffin, like illuminating paraffin. You know, most of us kind of talk about petrol and we worry about like getting food, but there are still lots of people in this country who use paraffin for heat and for cooking.
Right.
And that is also going. Every time the petrol price goes up, that also goes up. So they get a double whammy. It's always, you already are on the lower end of the economy and you get hit twice. All your food prices and all your transportation costs, and then also in order to cook and heat yourself. Correct.
And these are the realities that so many people are dealing with. And if you're putting up with those, don't feel like you're alone. And it's not just the poor and the middle class, because in South Africa, when all of this is said and done, it also doesn't make it very easy for people who are running businesses or people who are trying to manage, an entrepreneurship, a small business. These are the things that are hard. You have suddenly massive logistic price increases if you're delivering goods or you're providing a service or you have staff going between here and there. All of these costs go up, and ultimately they're borne by every one of us. We unfortunately can't pass this on to anyone else. People are complaining that it's government. I mean, really, this has got to do with international oil prices. It's got to do with our currency and how it performs against other currencies. And of course, there's a large part of the petrol price that is the government. But some of that we can do nothing about. That is where we get the money for the road accident fund, where we get money for repairing roads, where we get money for basic infrastructure. I mean, without it, we'd be in even more trouble. So you can argue that, but maybe that's for another day. Let us welcome someone who we often have on the show, and we're always thrilled to have him on, Mighti Jamie, who's always got an interesting take on so many things that are going on in South Africa. Jamie, it's nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good. I hope the audio is great.
Audio is perfect. And I mean, I love that background. I know
Jamie, have you moved into a palace?
No, it's a good aesthetic background. So
it's beautiful.
That's all it is.
You know what? We'll call it
the grand piano in the background.
I know. We'll call it
It's
aspirational
regal.
for the moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
It suits you. It suits you. All right.
Thank you.
For those people who don't know, Jamie is an award-winning international debating and public speaking champion and coach. And you can find out more about him. We'll put up all his handles on social media, so you can also follow him and pay attention to what he's doing outside of the show too. We got a lot to talk about. Can we just start, guys, with something which is always worthy of reflection? It's Africa Day. Yesterday was Africa Day. And it might be interesting. We check in with JJ Cornish every second week here on the show, and he gives us a rundown of what's happening not only in sub-Saharan Africa, but further north and further west. And it's always interesting to hear about countries like Senegal, countries like the Gambia. There's quite a lot going on the continent with respect to, Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram and all of that stuff. But there's also a massive change in the French presence in Africa, and I can't help noticing that yesterday the EFF were protesting outside the French embassy. Now, whether you guys think this is relevant or not, I think it's worthy of a mention. He says he wants, Julius, to have French removed as an official language in Africa. I mean, notwithstanding the fact that so many Congolese people who live in Africa, their first language is French, notwithstanding the fact that French and English are the two languages that kind of divide Africa, he may have a very valid point, but he's almost trying to wash away the past, which is just not practical. For many people, French is the language of commerce or industry or of education or of anything else in parts of Africa. There's Francophone and Anglophone Africa. But someone made the point with this that the EFF must be running really low on material. They must have so little, talking about fuel, in the tank that Julius has to talk about French being an official language. In South Africa, by the way, it's obviously not an official language. It's a very rare language, which is spoken by only a few people. And most of those people are people who have come to this country because they've fled other African countries. So it is extraordinary, even if you don't care about Francophone and Anglophone Africa, it's extraordinary how much publicity Julius gets for inane and irrelevant remarks. What is with the media giving him this attention? And here we are doing it, so you can blame me.
His clickbait. His clickbait.
That's it?
His absolute clickbait. So when he holds a press conference to kind of hold court downstairs there at Winnie Mandela House, everybody shows up because he's clickbait, because he is entertaining. He is entertaining to listen to, and he does have a lot of followers. So it really, that's why he gets so much attention. But you know, for me, and why I wanted to put this on the agenda for today, is the Pan-African conference, which happened in 1900 in London. W.E.B. Du Bois, and you know, there were lots of, as they called it at the time, Negroes who descended on London to hold this conference. We, one of the founding fathers of the ANC was there. They were Trinidadian, you know, from the islands, and people of African descent from all over the world. In 1900, they set a goal, not just for Africa, but for all Black people and people of African descent around the world, and defined the problem. And what they called the problem of the 20th century, remember this was 1900, would be that of emancipating people from colonial rule, from slavery, you know, Jim Crow and all of that kind of stuff was really at the end of it, right?
Yes.
And I would say, and I think we can all agree, that in 1990, when South Africa was declared free from apartheid, that they had achieved their goal. And it took them 90 years to do that. And today, what we don't have in Africa is we do not have vision led by Africans and African leaders and African citizens for what Africa's defining problem that we need to address over the next 100 years to move Africa to the next level is. We don't have it. We don't need, and listen, in South Africa, we don't even have a leadership that has a defining goal of what the problems we should be tackling today in South Africa to move to the next impact. You know, in fact, they've gone backwards, I think. Just when you hear all of the talk that they have of the past of colonialism, of apartheid. Not that that does not inform some of the problems that we still have today. But that problem was defined in the 1900. And work was done to solve it on a global scale. And we don't do that now. And that's why we see such poverty, such strife. We see Africans by the boatload trying to cross over into Europe because we don't have vision. We don't have a vision and leadership that's willing to work at it to get us to the next level. So I kind of think every year when it's Africa Day, it's always nice to think about it and reflect on how far we've come. But I think we need to start thinking and redefining where we're going.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who's setting a 90-year goal, but I think that's such a valuable assessment, Phumi. I mean, when you think about the fact that it did take 94 years for that goal to be, that very noble goal to be achieved. You know, what are the noble goals of the ANC? Building a 100-meter flagpole, which
It,
obviously, I mean, everybody's talking about this because it's such a kind of an electric issue. It's such an obvious one, and thank God, I have to say, like the people of South Africa, whether it was just noise on social media or anywhere else, getting this thing turned around with the president eventually canceling plans to do that. That does show you the power of people, even if it's in a very subtle sense, even if it's in an outrage, a form of kind of noise on social media. Well done to the people of this country for saying, no, you're not going to spend 22 million on that bullshit. Give us some proper, worthy goals. And if we're going to have legacy, if we're going to have some monument to reflect on, this period of our history, let it be something worthy. Thabo Mbeki put up Freedom Park. Nobody complained about that. It was a necessary addition to the Pretoria skyline. And I know this flag would have gone there. I'm a big fan of adding value, of every generation building monuments, keeping the history of the country alive, memorializing the people of that time. But I agree with you. Like, what are they going to say about us in 100 years?
and it really does not have to be the preserve of the ANC. It is not the preserve
Absolutely.
of the ANC. Setting an agenda, and this for me, and why Africa Day tends to be the right time on which to reflect on these things and push our leaders towards it, right? Is
Right.
because it's about now that it's called the African Union. It used to be the OAU, which is what Africa Day coincides with when they first or propagated the OAU.
Right.
We have the African Parliament, but really and truly, what is Africa's agenda? Other than what is being said in boardrooms of NGOs and head offices of grant makers all over the world, what is our agenda as Africa, as Africans? And what does Africa look like 100 years from today?
I'm glad you tabled that. What do you have to say to that, Jamie? Because I saw you nodding to some of what Phumi was saying.
So I think the first place that I'm going to start is just to discuss the relevance of the EFF going to the French embassy and whether or not, it's an empty canister of gas or whether there's something that matters to it. And I think the first thing is just to remember that we often get stuck in a bubble in South Africa and we don't appreciate how much the dynamics in the rest of Africa play out. And you often then see when you go to international bodies. And if you recall last year, was it last year when they were trying to vote for the Pan-African Parliament?
Yes,
you could see that there was a big division between the Francophone speaking countries and the Anglophone speaking countries, because there's a bit of tension there. And some of that tension is inherited from the contestation between the French and the British. But some of those divisions were cultivated in a neo-colonial paradigm. So the Francophone world in Africa is very important, and it's important to also understand what Pan-Africans think about France. So 3 examples I think will illustrate the point. Number one, France was very involved in pushing the no-fly zone in Libya in 2011, which was critical to the fall of Gaddafi. Now, whatever you think about Gaddafi, you have to also think about the post-war democratic situation. Post-2011, Libya became a failed state. Previously to that, it was dictatorship, maybe a benevolent dictatorship, maybe a not so benevolent dictatorship, but it was stable in some respect. And after 2011, basically the country was split into many fractions, and there were warring militias, people trying to contest for oil and all of that. And the long and short of it is that is when you begin to have an immigration crisis in the EU, because a lot of people were going through Libya and then going into Greece, into Turkey, through the Mediterranean Sea, and that exacerbated the immigration challenges that were being faced in Europe, and basically contributed to what we now know as Brexit and the rise of Boris Johnson. So that was a critical moment in history And many people in Africa view it as something that also contributed to a lack of stability in that particular region. Because if you know, in the Sahel region, there has been terrorist activity that has been affecting 3 countries predominantly: Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali. And that has led to the burning of schools, the killing of children, the general instability in the region.
Yes.
All of which can be traced back to what France advocated for, because they got their guy, Gaddafi, that they wanted to get, but they were not committed to a post-war transition. And so after Gaddafi was dead, they were basically hands off. So that is a more recent example, if you will. But another example is what has been going on in Cameroon. Cameroon has been under the leadership of Paul Biya for the last 42 years, since 1982, actually. And he is a dictator. He's somebody who runs a faux democracy, their elections, but he rigs them, and he basically tries to oppress the people of his country and extract resources. Many of the years that he has been president, he hasn't even been living in Cameroon, and he has actually been waging a war against the English-speaking people, who have really been frustrated about their exclusion from the economy, even though critical resources such as rubber are actually extracted from their side of the country.
And I'm just going to pause you for a moment, Jamie. We must not forget, when we talk about Paul Biya, because it's my favorite thing to talk about, his wife, Chantal Biya, and her amazing hair. I got to put this picture up on the screen. I know that we're being serious here, but
that's a wild hairstyle.
That hair is also serious.
Yes,
Tina Turner inspired. That's all I can say about it.
But Jamie,
so, I mean,
if we can, because I don't want us to leave any of this behind. I think everything that you're saying now is massively relevant. I'm just concerned about the chain of causality. Gaddafi. It's not just the French who can take the blame there. We know, of course, that Barack Obama's administration, and chiefly Hillary Clinton, who was then the Secretary of State, did a lot to destabilize that region. And we may blame Macron and his predecessors in France, going back some 20 years. In fact, you could go back 100 years if you wanted to. But there are lots of other people who are also to blame here, that glossing over them and making the French the bad guys is a little simplistic. I'm sure you'll agree.
Look, I don't think it's just about, sorry, Jamie. Gareth, I don't think it's just about the French being simplistic. I think being simplistic about the French and their role in Libya. It is also about the military presence of France in Africa. If you think about Mali, Cameroon, there's so many different places where there are French legions.
But very often by invitation of the leaders of that country.
This is what I wanted to say, and this is the thing, Jamie, is I don't think that anybody downplays how the French or many other military powers play a role in Africa and the instability in Africa. And sure, Julius definitely has a bone to pick around those things, and we cannot be insular as South Africa in terms of what else is happening across the continent. But the reality, and this is the failure of African leaders, is that whoever pays the piper calls the tune. So for as long as African leaders are content to be beholden to all of these various, and again, it's not just governments. I want to make the point that NGOs and what is termed civil society organizations call an inordinate amount of power in terms of policies that are made in Africa, in terms of the things that we kind of are going to look at, are we going to complain about, because they have the money and they can buy the influence.
Yeah, big problem. I want you to carry on though with your examples, Jamie, because I was interested in the third one.
Yeah. So I mean, the point I was making is that countries such as Cameroon, what you have there is regimes that have been propped up by the French. Specifically for the interest of either having French companies doing exploration or providing mobile services, companies such as Total extracting resources such as rubber, coca, and a variety of goods that then get refined in France. So it's not just Cameroon. If you look at countries like Gabon, where the Bongo dynasty basically has been running that country like it's a kingdom. You had Omar, then you had the Sun come after, and all of that has been because the French regime has propped up these leaders, has supported them, in ways that benefit France. So as much as there's a good discussion to have about what African leaders allow and disallow, there's a different discussion when you have a former colonial power, which is one of the, the P5, basically propping up regimes for protracted periods of time, because you can't really say that those regimes, one, leading in the interest of the people, and two, that they enjoy the mandate from the people. They enjoy a mandate from France, and as long as they continue to provide France what is in alignment with its foreign policy, they will stay in power, resources. And France also controls a lot of the currency dynamics in the former Francophone world.
I do hear that point, and I think it's a very well-made point. And France has got bloodied hands, just like Belgium, just like England, just like all of the other colonial powers do. But we're looking back now, some 60 to 100 years, even in the most generous applications here. And these regimes are very much these kleptocracies, which are often propped up, as you rightly say, by these former colonial powers. If you're a Frenchman, though, it is in your interests for French ideas and French businesses and French interests all over the world to be sought. And I don't know why we apply a different standard to France and we expect them to be altruistic and going around the world doing good, when we don't apply the same thing to our own neighbors in this country when it comes to people who come to South Africa to seek out better, greener pastures, healthier opportunities. We treat Congolese people in this country either like car guards or bodyguards or worse. And it seems to me like we have this idea that the Europeans must behave in a better way when we ourselves don't in Africa. And we expect people to apply a different standard to themselves and somehow hold themselves to a standard that we would never hold ourselves to. I think South Africa has exploited our relationship with so many other African countries in our own interests, for as nasty and nefarious a purpose sometimes, whether it was under the apartheid regime or since 1994. If you consider how we've imposed ourselves on other African countries, sometimes a part of the chagrin. Remember when Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma was passed over for AU chair, and we were all upset because we said, "Oh, we're South Africa. We should be important. We should have our way." Remember? And it was again largely Francophone Africa who stood against us. Do we not have some kind of superiority complex when it comes to the continent? I know Zimbabwe, Zambia, Angola, Botswana even sometimes have not very nice things to say about the way South Africa behaves.
Well, I think actually South Africa doesn't do enough in the region. We almost hands off because one of the criticisms about the AU as a bloc is that it's been a dictators club, and when they rebranded it and tried to relaunch it, they were trying to move away from the dictators club framework to something that would more instill liberal values across the continent, values of freedom, values of human rights, etc., etc. But what I will agree with you on is that we don't have great relationships with the rest of Africa at an interperson level, but there are some economic benefits that do accrue. You've got companies like MTN and Vodacom operating on the continent. You've got South African retail companies which have gotten a lot of benefits from the failure of neighboring countries because we export resources, retail goods to those countries in mass. A lot of the trucks going into Zimbabwe, a lot of the buses going into Zimbabwe and the rest of Africa are carrying goods that basically came from Checkers and Jet and Mr. Price and Pick and Pay and all of that.
Right.
So we're providing a lot of resources,
even
equipment.
DSTV. DSTV is
Yes.
just looking for audiences all over this continent, and they're getting them sometimes at the expense of local language, culture, and very often local production. There used to be at least very, very successful and small businesses that were creating this stuff. DSTV comes in and wipes them off, and they end up with either Nollywood or South African content, even if they're in Mozambique.
Sure. But I think I'm going to be cautious about the media framework because a lot of these African regimes are still dictatorship, and sometimes there may be a benefit to having a DSTV. The reason why I'm saying this is because, for instance, in Zimbabwe, you have one television channel the Zimbabwean Broadcasting Corporation, and it's based ZTV. It's controlled by ZANU-PF, and you can't get like any independent thought on that platform. You can't get any criticism of government. You can't get any real discourse. I mean, if we were having this conversation on ZBC, like at the end of this conversation, we'd all be arrested and would probably be in and out of jail for the next year. So, I mean, DSTV just provides...
This is precisely the problem with our leaders in general. So when you talk about the Pan-African Parliament, when you talk about the African Union, the fact that they are unable to hold each other accountable is exactly where the problem lies. I mean, they were unable to call Mugabe to order. They are unable to. So where there is no freedom of expression, freedom of movement, and we would be, as a continent, all of us, so much better off if the AU was to actually do what they had set out in their constitution, to be about a better relation across Africa for trade, for economy, for freedom. Then and those leaders to hold each other accountable. I know my favorite person being Cyril Ramaphosa, and you talk about South Africa not playing enough of a role, Jamie. But it's true. South Africa has the economic muscle, and South Africa for a long time also had the moral authority, the moral authority to be able to shape the discussion across the continent, to be able to move the continent to a place, also because we had the money, right? So a lot of, and again, this is why somebody said in the comments, South Africa is like the Karen of Africa. It is also because economically, South Africa has always been in a position, historically been in a position where, again, we are the purse. We hold the purse to all of those things. And so we could use that authority to push for more freedom, to push for, in Zimbabwe, for instance, when ZANU-PF lost the election, we could have pushed for that, but it didn't suit the government of the day to be vocal about it. And that's the problem. That's the problem with the AU.
And don't worry,
they're scared of each other.
But we are bearing the costs of that now. And
absolutely.
All over South Africa, there are Zimbabweans who are trying to eke out an existence. And all over South Africa, there are increasing incidences of xenophobia. And we're not doing anything to improve our relations with our near neighbors, because the people who are coming here are not coming here because they love South Africa. They're coming here because they have no other option. And it's because of the policies of our government and the Zimbabwean government over the last 20 years. There's no way to make an excuse, and this is also where people go, well, history is so complicated, right? And the French being in Africa and their influence here is clearly, on the balance of things, probably the bad thing. And that's why when Julius goes to the French embassy, I don't think it's about Francophone versus Anglophone Africa. I don't think it's about colonialism. I mean, there probably isn't anyone alive in South Africa who can remember the last French Governor General of the Congo. Or, well, the Congo was Belgian, but let's say Cameroon, for example. But the problem is that these things are just a desperate attempt by a local political party to kind of have a go at colonialism, maybe because they've said some quite xenophobic things about the people who come from those French African countries. And now he's trying to get some attention. I don't think it's authentic.
It's a little bit more than that, though. It's a little bit more than that. The thing about what the Francophone bloc within the AU, the role that they play, and I think it's a marginally clever strategy by the EFF to do that and put themselves on the map in that way. And this was an insight I got from, we were talking about her the other day, Gareth, in the office, of a friend of mine's mother, was one of the founding members of the MDC.
Right.
And for the people who do not remember this, kind of in 2000 is the year that the MDC had quite a strong showing in the general elections in Zimbabwe. And for the first time, I think ZANU-PF were faced with a very strong opposition that people had voted for.
Those
On
are the
the
days
ground,
those are the days of what, Morgan Tsvangirai.
those are the days of Morgan Tsvangirai. And at the time, people on the ground are saying that the MDC essentially, on a very slim margin, won that election, and ZANU stole it from them. In 2008, when they had their next election, which is where the power-sharing government in Zimbabwe came to be. But from the MDC, one of the things that they know was what worked against them in terms of the international community coming to their aid against ZANU-PF is because they were unknown. So when the UN is not calling some MDC to say what's going on over there, but they are calling the AU to say, who are these people that are the MDC? What is the status quo on the ground? And what Julius Malema is doing with the EFF by putting himself on the map in this manner is the AU is now acutely aware of this party and their policies and where they stand on the African agenda. So when the time comes, as we know it is coming in 2024, of a reckoning with the ANC losing ground, they are going to need people to vouch for them on a global stage. And the AU is very likely to be that, that kind of ally for them.
That's a very interesting point. I do want us to move on. I by no means do I not feel like giving this the attention it deserves, but we have spent half an hour, and I know Jamie's got some points that he wants to bring in here too. So we spoke about gun control in the first half of the show this morning because there's this horrific Texas shooting. There was that horrific shooting in Buffalo, New York just the other day. America seems to have a very particular problem with gun violence. And I wondered what you think, Jamie, and what you think, Phumi, we can learn from that here in South Africa, and what we should be doing to mitigate in the case of, we're third, by the way, on the list of school shooting countries in the world. We only have 6, according to the latest statistics. America has some 288. Mexico comes in second. It was an interesting tabulation, and those are the latest statistics. But it's worth reflecting on, even though in South Africa, by no means do we have the same level of trouble. And where it happens in South Africa, it's either gangsters, largely, mostly in the Western Cape, but there are isolated incidents here too. What do you think of this, Jamie, and what's your point of view on all of this?
Well, I think that it's a classic exhibition of the failure of democracy when you allow lobby groups to participate in your politics, because the democratic system is one where the lawmakers are representatives of the people and they're supposed to make decisions that are in the interests of the people. But when you have these lobby groups that can now influence the political system with money, with these super PACs, etc., then you have politicians now paying attention to the special interests. In this particular case, it's the National Rifle Association. I mean, they've had, I think if I still remember correctly, 27 school shootings this year alone in America, 144 mass shootings. There are more mass shootings. There are 2 or more mass shootings a day in America, actually, at this particular point. And there have been 900 mass shootings since Sandy Hook, which was the most atrocious shooting that happened in a school in 2012. Now, in the UK, I think, just let me get my notes right on this, there was a shooting that occurred in 1996 in Dunblane at a primary school. And 16 people were killed and a 45-year-old teacher was killed. By the end of 1997, the UK Parliament had banned private ownership of most handguns, and they actually built on other bans which had occurred after a different shooting in Hungerford, where a semi-automatic weapon was used. So already there had been a semi-automatic weapon ban, and then they banned the rest of the guns. They've only had, I think, they've had one mass shooting in 2010 in Cumbria that left 12 people dead. Since then, they haven't had any mass shootings.
I just want to talk about the NRA for a second, because the NRA, obviously a lobby group, massively in favor of the legalization and availability of all kinds of weapons. But they're also a group that has some 5.5 million members in America. And those are ordinary citizens of the United States who really like guns, clearly. Now, they're a lobby group, but at the same time, there is an equally large, if not larger, anti-gun lobby in America. There is one in this country too. We've got Gun-Free South Africa, who are well-funded and work very, very hard to try and prevent private firearm ownership. In a country like South Africa, though, we know we can't rely on the police. We know that if someone breaks into our houses, as I told Phumi sadly happened to a friend of mine just yesterday, we have no recourse anywhere else. We can't trust the machinery of state to come to our aid. And if someone broke into my house, I would rather rely on my own resources, whether it's a sword or a knife or a gun, than rely on calling the police. And that's just a reality for South Africans. In America, they obviously have a culture of a militia, an armed citizenry. This comes from the same way we talk about history in Africa and colonialism, and what an ongoing long tail colonialism has in terms of its effect on the way we think, the way we talk, the way we interact. Similarly, in America, and for probably less time than colonialism had on this continent, they have been an armed citizenry who rise up either against each other in the Civil War just 170 odd years ago, or in the war against Britain, the first war of independence, some 200 and something years ago. It's a country where this is the tradition. And of course, it's going to have horrific and negative consequences of the worst kind. But it's not something we're going to breed out of them just by making laws. And trust me, they've tried. In certain states, they have tried this. In certain states, they've made it law that you can't carry, that you cannot own a gun, that you can't drive around with a gun. Hasn't always worked.
Gareth, the thing for me, and we spoke a little bit earlier about the culture of America and gun ownership and brandishing weapons. There is a lot to be learned for South Africa, and it's about culture. South Africa has become, over the past 20 years, an incredibly violent society. And that's, when we talked about shootings in schools, and you said we've had 6, and I said shootings, because what we do have a problem with in South Africa, especially in the schools, is stabbings. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this is indicative of the kind of society that we have. And knives are easier. Knives and sharp objects are easier to carry, to hide, to bring into the school environment.
If we had more guns, we would have more shootings.
We would have more shootings. It's very difficult to get a gun in South Africa. It's difficult to purchase a legal firearm. Even an illegal firearm, I think it's very difficult to get hold of one.
Absolutely.
But we do have a violent society. And that's what we need to worry about. You talk about the failure of the police system, policing. Again, it's something that in South Africa we need to get a handle on, and very quickly. This, I say it often on the show, that I do believe that violence should be the reserve of the state. It is the state that should have the right to mete out violence. It's not every single person. We want strong policing. We want visible policing. And we want the police to be there to apprehend criminals or criminal behavior. And we don't have that. And by not having that, it is breeding a culture in our society of violence and contempt, because people feel that they have to protect themselves. That's what we need to do.
I mean, I fundamentally dispute the fact that the state should have a monopoly on violence. I think that's the only reason that they can extort taxes from us. I think it's the only reason that they can abuse us, as they have been in South Africa since the dawn of time, of the dawn of government in this country. Individuals have some responsibility to protect themselves, even in the most well-run democracies. I mean, Switzerland is famously a country of a militia as well. They don't have a standing army, but every adult man in Switzerland is required to have a gun, and every adult man in Switzerland is required to report for military service if, through some bizarre machination in European politics, the country of Switzerland is invaded. And yet they don't have school shootings, and yet they don't have the violence that America does. And I think it's not
the culture of it is the culture of that country that is what we are talking about. And this is why I'm saying that one of the things that we need to get right fundamentally in South Africa is the culture of South Africans. And we have famously, again, we have the highest rates of GBV, gender-based violence, in this country. And this is indicative of the fact that South Africans are violent people.
And worse,
that's what we need to get
worse
right.
than that, Worse than that, we know that the victims of gender-based violence very often know the aggressor and the attacker personally. They know these
Yeah.
people. These are not strangers walking on the street. And also to your point, Jamie, I just want to throw this in here because I do think it's relevant to the point you made earlier about Britain, that after they banned guns, knife crime skyrocketed. In places like London, there are young people running around with knives, threatening pretty much everybody, and if not stabbing them. So it has become a next level kind. And obviously a knife can do a lot less damage than a gun. We get that. And a handgun can do a lot less damage than an automatic rifle. We get that too. I don't know why anyone who lives in a town in America would ever pick up a gun of any kind and go and shoot school children. There is something so revolting about that it beggars belief. And I wonder how much of what the theory that we're discussing actually matters in a world where people are crazy enough to do something like to go into Buffalo, New York, and just kill people because they're black. To go into a school and kill innocent school children. You have to have some real problems going on in your head. And as Phumi points out, what is it about the culture of America that makes it such a swamp for this kind of thing? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's important to point out that the control element has been effective in countries like Australia. I think they had a Tasmanian shooting in 1996, and after they banned assault weapons and all of those other kind of weapons, they haven't had a mass shooting. I think they didn't have one for 10 years after that. So even though there are other tools that can be used by people with malicious intent, criminals, etc., there is something that happens when you have control. But Americans are not having any of those conversations in a meaningful way that leads to even modifications on the age of gun purchase, more mental health screening for gun buyers, etc., simply because the system has been so fragmented by lobby groups. And you ask, what's wrong with the culture in America? The culture in America right now has led to democratic failure. If you were to ask me right now, does American democracy work? No, it doesn't. And that's why you have the mental health issues escalating. The mental health problems in America have reached, I think, levels that now I think almost every American is dealing with some kind of a mental health issue. And that's because their legislative making system has not stepped in the gap to close some of the social ills that should be dealt with at a lawmaking level. I mean, these guys don't have maternity leave. They don't have public health care when other poorer countries can deliver quality public health care for their citizens.
Like who are we comparing them with, for example?
Canada, Britain, two examples that should suffice for the purpose of our discussion. But when you look at America, you look at the failure to protect the minimum wage, where that even is a debate, where you've got the inequality skyrocketing in the last 50 years.
These don't have to do with gun crime directly.
They do not necessarily just gun crime.
This is a massive causal.
So let me finish the point. Let me finish the point, because I'm making a meta point that the mental health issues in a generation of Americans have been exacerbated by the failure of their Congress and their Senate to stop negative externalities which do affect a society. So I'm not saying this particular crazy person who shot people in the school was affected by all of that, but we're talking about culture broadly. And if you have a situation where big pharmaceutical companies block the reduction of drug prices, private healthcare companies block access to healthcare.
But Jamie,
let me make the point. The point I'm making is, hear me out so that you can assess the argument in its totality. I'm saying to you that when you have all of these lobby groups protecting their sector of business, and I'm going to give you, let's use two examples. Let's just use two. The reason why there was a baby formula shortage in America is partly because of the oligopoly that exists in baby formula manufacturing. You've got three companies that manufacture baby formula. If one of them is eliminated, then you have a shortage immediately for whatever security reason. How did you get? Let me just finish. Let me finish.
No, I want you to finish, but I think we get what you are saying. Stop with the examples so you can get to your point and we can respond.
So the point that I'm making is that when you have lobby groups creating social ills because they can prevent positive redress by the government, after a while, you have a bad culture, whether it's in the gun sector, whether it's in the stock market, whether it's in education. And when you have all of those cultures coming together, you have a society where there are toxic outcomes. And one of those outcomes, in specifically the gun side, is that crazy people get access to guns, racist people get access to guns, and they shoot people because the gun manufacturers and the gun lobby control the laws around guns. When we know from other examples,
foundation of America, at the foundation of America, the founding fathers of that country, this is how this country came to be. Always about interests, and it was always about interest groups or groupings of people with the particular.
But the founding fathers
interest.
are not Moses, and
No,
they put it in the Constitution.
Calm down. I need to give you the opportunity to make your point. So all I'm saying to you is that, again, we're talking about the culture. This is one specific sliver, and it's easy for you to conflate an issue here by making such a leap of causality.
There's no leap. There's no leap.
Look, that's what we hear. You may think there's no leap. What we hear is a leap.
For me, by way of illustration,
no
not
leap.
one of the mass shooters has ever cited minimum wage as being a reason why he took a gun and shot people. I mean,
but you're missing the point. The point is
the
democracy fails. The democracy fails because lobby groups prevent negative externalities from being prevented.
Jamie,
we're not missing the point. We are listening to what you are saying, and this is what we hear you saying.
But then you're straw manning me. You're straw manning the point. Because let me reiterate. A negative externality in economics is when you have a negative outcome as a result of market activities. The market activity here is the selling of assault weapons. So when you have a negative externality, what is supposed to happen in a democracy, even one which is a democratic...
Hold on. You're assuming that's a negative externality.
It is a negative externality. When people get shot in schools and malls, that's a negative externality. That's not what you wanted.
Ownership of private firearms is not a negative externality.
No. That's where you're missing it. I didn't say ownership of firearms is a negative externality. I said that the shootings are the negative externality. Sure. And the shootings are a result of assault weapons being sold to any and everybody without necessary controls. Who wants that? The people who want that to happen are the gun manufacturers. Now, you're supposed to come in and mitigate the negative externality through legislation. That's the purpose of the lawmakers. But when the gun manufacturers and the gun lobby funds you, you don't take the necessary steps. By the way, there was a gun reform that was passed in 1994. It expired in 2004. And after it expired, the mass shootings shot up. Do you know why it wasn't repassed? Because they lost the vote in Senate and Congress. So why did they lose the vote? Because the lobby took action and funded the politicians who opposed it.
Just because we're going all over the place, I'd like to point out some other secondary reasons.
We're in one place.
Hold on. Where we're seeing all of this, because we're looking at the firearms. I think mental health is a big issue, and I agree with you there, Jamie. But instead of
why is there poor mental health in America? Because healthcare is expensive. Why is healthcare expensive? Because the lobby groups.
Jamie, we cannot institutionalize people who are mad anymore. There are lots and lots of people in America who are crazy. I know that this is not a popular way to talk about people who have mental health problems, but in the old days, in the days where we were able to diagnose people and keep them out of society because they were dangerous, we did exactly that. Now, they don't do that anymore in America. LA and San Francisco are filled with homeless people who are living under bridges and in tents with hypodermic needles spread all over the spaces around them. This is not a healthy country, and I agree with you on that in that respect. But no longer are we able to treat people with mental health conditions as people with mental health conditions. We're now to normalize them and to have them walking around in society and sometimes buying guns. If we're going to go after guns as being the problem, we need to equally level our aim, if you'll pardon the use of that ugly pun, at the government for having made it possible for mentally ill people to just live in society alongside everyone else. Because every one of these people, almost to a man, is not just filled with malicious intent and not just hungry to get their hands on a gun, but also full of problems in their heads. And of course, you're right.
Can I respond to that in a minute?
in the indirect sense, you're correct. A lot of these externalities, a lot of these problems that are going on in society are part of the reason. But it's not true. And you can't prove, even if you live for
respond to
100
that?
years, that some minimum wage legislation that is or
Are you
isn't
focusing
passed,
on the minimum
what
wage?
it-
You're missing the
It's
point.
just, it's an example of what you said. I'm
Let
just
me
quoting from what
respond.
you said.
Let me respond quickly. Give me a minute, just an uninterrupted minute. So the three problems that you spoke about in your discourse just before. One is the gun issue, two is the mental health issue, and three is the homelessness issue. All of these issues are not redressed because they are powerful corporations that benefit from lack of strong regulation. Let me give you an example.
What are the-
Let me finish. So number one, mental health. If America had affordable and accessible healthcare, a lot of people would not have the mental health issues that they have right now. But because healthcare is inaccessible for a majority of people, I mean, it's pure maths. If you've got 300 people, but 200 million people can't access healthcare, those 200 million who don't have access to the healthcare, some of them are going to have mental health care problems. And if you don't support people who came back from the war properly, where they have got PTSD, and then you reintegrate them into society without giving them full support for their mental health issues, guess what's going to happen with some of those people who have had military training? They are going to use those weapons in ways that create the negative externalities. So the issue of the gun control. So firstly, you have got large access of guns in the society because the manufacturers and the lobby are very powerful. They've prevented legislation which used to exist. Then on the homelessness issue, to solve homelessness, you would need affordable housing. But affordable housing is an anathema to big, real estate companies. So the legislation doesn't favor the creation. Yes.
Hold on.
So
When
is the reason we got homelessness, not
real estate.
policies by
Yes.
Democrats in
Gareth,
California.
To have
Gareth, calm
affordable
down.
housing,
Jamie,
to have
your minute
affordable
is up.
housing, the state need to intervene. So you
Jamie,
don't
your
have
minute
state
is up.
intervention because of the lobbying.
Your minute is up. Gareth, hold on a second. So all of these points that you are making, Jamie, we know the statistics in America is that the people who are most affected by all of those points, access to affordable housing, access to affordable health, and easy access to guns, right? So those are the points that you are making. And you're saying these three things, the confluence of these three things is what allows America to have this culture of mass shootings. In the mass shootings that America has reported over the past 5 months, how many of those perpetrators are Black Americans?
No, you see, you're making the mistake.
Stop.
It's not. I didn't say it's a race thing,
Stop.
and I don't want
No,
you
no,
to
no.
assume.
I'm not
because
saying it's a
America
race
has-
thing.
We're
Hold
not saying
on,
it's
Jamie.
Phumi,
I'm not
All
saying
Americans can't access
That's the
healthcare.
point.
It's 200
Stop.
million people, but 30 million Black people. So it's not about
Stop.
only the Black people should be the ones doing the shooting, but
No,
they
no,
are
no.
doing
I
it
am
in
not
Chicago.
talking.
It is
I am
happening
not
in
talking
Chicago.
about the fact that it is only that. I am saying in the percentage of people that are perpetrating these heinous acts, right? Adversely, because the 30 million Americans are more prone to being affected by all of the things that you say can be directly linked to these mass shootings. Why
You would
is it
expect
a
the proportion to be
disproportionate number of them who are the perpetrators of this crime?
So here's my
This
answer.
is why I'm saying that your argument, unfortunately, what you
No.
are saying may sound like, and you are saying it
No.
so eloquently and so passionately.
Convincingly.
However, it is untrue because the numbers do not bear witness to what you are saying.
I have a 30-second answer for this. And the 30-second answer is that the mass shootings, as we consider them, always exclude the kinds of Black on Black shootings as well. So if you're saying that there are high numbers of mental health issues, PTSD, gun access, and homelessness in predominantly Black communities, those mass shootings have been happening. They're just called Black on Black crime or gang crime. In Chicago is the murder capital of America because there are mass shootings there every day, but they don't get counted with these other mass shootings because of the Black and Black nature of it. So it's just put into the category of gang related. But if we extended the definition of mass shooting to black on black gang related quote unquote crimes, what you would also see is that the number shoots exponentially up. But the point that I'm making is if you have lobby groups preventing access to healthcare, lobby groups making access to guns increase, and lobby groups preventing access to affordable housing or legislation that creates affordable housing, you have a nexus of externalities that
Jamie,
creates a dystopia.
So this kid and the one who shot up Buffalo, New York, and all those people who lost their lives there, both of these people, this guy happens to be a trans individual as well, which brings up a whole lot of very uncomfortable questions.
Well, apparently that's not true. Apparently that was fake news.
It's of no interest to me. It's just something that came up in the comments now. The point being that I think in both of those cases, these were people who were probably still living with their parents, the 18-year-old certainly in Buffalo, New York, who had affordable healthcare, who had schooling, they had education for what intents and purposes that might help to assuage the issues that you're pointing out here. And very many of these people seem to not come from destitution and privation or the lack of government interest in their lives. Very often they are just disgruntled outsiders. And we know there's an epidemic in America of meaninglessness and purposelessness among young people, which could be at the heart of this. How much do we blame bad parenting? How much do we blame individual mental health issues? And I don't know that a lot of this has to do with government policy. I think you look at it and you realize that you're actually dealing with people. And the big problem with so much of what's going on in the world at the moment, even when you hear Klaus Schwab speaking at the World Economic Forum this week, is that you've got these people who say, we know better, we can make policies that will improve the world. And actually, because you're dealing with individuals, and so many of them are messed up, and always have been, a certain percentage of humanity is always messed up. And obviously, if they can get their hands on a gun, they're that much more dangerous to society. But they could just have a smart mouth and cause as much damage, like Adolf Hitler or God knows how many other people in history. These people are part of society, and no utopian government will ever be able to extirpate them from among us. They are living next door to us, as we know in South Africa. A lot of the most evil, wicked perpetrators are people who are known to our wives, our brothers, our aunts, our sisters. And if they had guns, they'd be that much more dangerous. And we can thank God that they don't. But they're still dangerous people. And it's not government policy that makes those people. Some people just are.
I just wish we had more time. I wish we had more time because there are some things that you can do at a state level to prevent people with mental health.
Not when you have.
I'm talking about in America.
In America,
I mean, obviously here the dynamics are different. Here, I would like to own a gun. To be honest with you, here I would like to own a gun. But there are some. We just don't have enough time to explore everything. So I just have to say thank you.
And I maintain that it is a very bad culture that America has bred in its fabric, in terms of the entitlement of certain groups of people to take their gun and open fire on an unsuspecting and unarmed part of the populace. And unfortunately, what we have in South Africa is similarly a different kind of violent society that we are breeding into the fabric of our society, which in time, if it goes unchecked, in time will get us to a place where that level of entitlement, of meting out violence to unsuspecting and unarmed citizens is not going to be a once in a blue moon occurrence.
I'm just going to wrap it up with Congo Chris, who said Hitler's been mentioned, Godwin's law has been breached, conversation over. You know, whenever my fault, sorry, but we are at 8:00. Jamie, it's always good to have you on. You know what? I
wish we had more time.
I know, so do I. And I think so do, all the people who are listening this morning. I love that we actually got into the meat of both Africa and particularly the Anglo and Francophone Africa split, some of those things which you never get to talk about. And this thing of gun violence, which again, in South Africa, thank God, is not as big a problem as America, but we need to talk about it too. Thank you both so much, Phumi. We will see you next week on the Burning Platform. Jamie, have an excellent week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for being part of the show.
Cheers, guys.
Lovely to see you. Thank you, everybody.